Hi everyone, my name is Bethany Bradley and I am presenting a tool talk on behalf of the Northeast Risk Management Network. So this tool talk is actually for a new website that we've created called RISCCTools.org, which we're setting up to be sort of a, hopefully over the longer term, a sister site for the Risk Network website that will be a good space for us to put any tools that get developed over the years. So we have one so far, and it is related to visualizing state invasive plant regulations. So before I get to the tool, I just wanted to give a little bit of background so that we're all on the same page as to why state regulations for invasive plants are necessary. We know and have known for a long time how invasive plants arrive and spread. They are predominantly intentionally introduced as ornamentals in gardening and landscaping. So this is just a graphic illustrating that from a survey of over 1,000 invasive plants in the US, 60% were intentionally introduced. And of those, the majority, so amounting to more than 50% of overall invasive plants in the US are ornamental introductions. So that's how we end up with, in the Northeast, plants like bittersweet and purple loosestrife because they had ornamental value and then escaped cultivation. So because the majority of invasive plants are introduced as ornamentals, prohibiting the sale and propagation of invasive plants is a really effective method for reducing plant invasions. Unfortunately, we have a lot of gaps in current regulations at the state level. So regulations that prohibit invasive plants are done at the state level. This map is from a paper by Eve Bury and Emily Fusco from a few years ago, where they looked at the number of species that are present in a state. So that's what we're visualizing here. And present is based on the USDA plants database. So number of species that are present in the state that are regulated by one or more of those states' direct neighbors, but not regulated by that state. So you can see on here that there are lots of states that have 40 or 50 or even more species that are present, regulated by neighboring states, but not regulated in that focal state. And on average, if you compare neighboring states within the US, there's only a 17% overlap in regulated invasive plants. So one state, neighboring state, you would think that there would be a pretty high amount of overlap, like 90%. We're basically in the same ecoregion if we're talking about, for example, Massachusetts, where I live, and a neighboring state like Connecticut. And yet, even across the Northeast region where we are, 17% overlap in regulated plants. So very patchy regulations. And so what that leads to is a landscape where most invasive plants remain for sale. So lack of consistent regulations leads to a lot of confusion for vendors of plants. That includes vendors of invasive plants. And it also creates a lot of confusion for the general public as to what is actually invasive. So the net result is that most invasive plants still end up for sale, and in total, another paper by Eve Bury and others found that 61% of invasive plants regulated someplace in the US or managed otherwise as invasive are still for sale. So we've created an online tool on this RISCCTools.org website to try to help us visualize and communicate what invasive species are regulated across the states, not just in the Northeast, but across the US. So it's a pretty straightforward tool, we think, at least, and we're just launching it in 2026, so really welcome feedback on this. So there are two main things that you can do with this. One is to choose your state. So I'm going to just go with New York right now. And that will then bring up a list of all of the regulated invasive plants. We've got it in reverse alphabet, so I'll put it in regular alphabet. So this tells us that at least as of when we last updated this resource, there were 77 species, invasive, either regulated plants or prohibited plants within the state of New York. You can see what all of those are. You can scroll through some of these. You can also download a text file or a comma separated values file to look at the spreadsheet of all of those different species, and you can choose from any different state that you wanted to look at here. Another thing that you can do is to choose based on a species, right? So if I wanted to look at barberry, for example, oops, having a little typing problem. Look at barberry, that will then populate this filter to show me all of the states that are regulating in one way or another. So different states have different ways of regulating things, regulating barberry. And I can, of course, download those just like I can download the other ones. The other thing that we have on here in terms of visualization is a map of which states are regulating these species. So, for example, if you are in Pennsylvania, maybe this, given that most of your neighbors are regulating barberry, that might be a species that you would want to put on your list of something to regulate so that we've got more consistent regulations across the Northeast region, Connecticut also. The information that's in the Regulated Plant Data Viewer all comes from the National Plant Board website. So we've got a link to that here. And this is a list of PDFs of laws and regulations for all of the different states pertaining to invasive plant species. So it's always a good idea to trust but verify. We did our best in terms of translating all that information into the database that underlies the regulatory visualization, but not a bad idea to go back and see, here's Alabama has their list of Class A, Class B, Class C noxious weeds, for example. Another thing to note on here is the date that these were updated. So some of, been doing generally a pretty good job with state regulations updating reasonably regularly. Recently, that's a lot of R's in a row, but some of them are a little bit older. So, and the National Plant Board is not necessarily the most up to date relative to some of the states sometimes too. So there's a couple of places where things might go slightly awry in terms of us having the most up to date information in the regulatory visualization. If you are interested in the underlying database so that you can learn more about what regulatory level means, for example, or you just love a good database, then that is also linked here. This is our most recently updated regulated plants database. It was most recently updated in June of 2025. So it's March of 2026 right now. So our hope is to try to update this at least once a year, probably in the early summertime, just based on academic time availability. But this is the full database, in this case, organized by scientific name. And we have information here about what the regulatory levels mean for different states, where we were able to find that information. So for Alabama, for example, here are the definitions of their Class A, B, and C noxious weeds. All right, so that is it for the regulatory visualization. I just want to pop this back up one more time. This is the website, so you can either go to RISCCTools.org and click the link for regulatory visualization, or you can get there directly, risctools.org/regulatory-visualization, or you can scan the QR code and get there yourself. Thanks so much.